Noon, an investigation at the mysterious Georgia Guidestones. Here's a live exclusive Sky 4 look from the site. People who live nearby say they heard a boom this morning. Right now, our Rashad Williams is joining us live from Elbert County, Georgia, with what we know so far. Rashad.
Well, Destiny, right now we know that GBI is assisting with this investigation, but we've got multiple units here on scene, including the GBI's bomb disposal unit. Now, the GBI tells us there is still an active explosive hazard happening here. So to give you a closer look, I want to show you some viewer photos that were sent to us. There's a lot of rubble as a result of what GBI says stems from unknown individuals that detonated an explosive device around 4 a.m., which has destroyed a large portion of this structure. And we do know that Georgia Guidestones has 4 column-like sides to it. And from the photos, Sky 4 video, and from where I'm standing right now, it looks like there are now 3. We've seen several comments from people that live in this area saying they believed it was thunder because it caused their houses to shake. Some describing it as a boom that they heard and felt around 4 a.m. Again, GBI confirming they believe this happened around 4 a.m. So I want to give you a live look at Sky 4 once again. Over the scene right now, GBI has started to mark this area. And for those that don't know what the Georgia Guidestones are, according to Explore Georgia, in part, it's Elberton's most unusual and mysterious set of granite monoliths known as America's Stonehenge, which stands at 19 feet high, and it also serves as an astronomical calendar, as well as containing messages about the conservation of mankind, which is seen for many here in this area as controversial. Now again, details are limited at this time, but just to reiterate, investigators on scene have told us there is still an active explosive hazard here at the Georgia Guidestones. We will be working.
We do need more money, but we don't just need more money for vaccines for children eventually. We need more money to plan for the second pandemic. There's going to be another pandemic. We have to think ahead. And that's not something the last outfit did very well. That's something we've been doing fairly well. That's why we need the money. Managing global energy needs, taking on the climate crisis, dealing with the spread of diseases. And the choices we make now, in my view, are going to set a direction of our world for several generations to come, both to fight the pandemic and to prepare for the next one, because it will not be the last pandemic we have to deal with. That's why the United States, together with the G7 partners and the World Bank, are investing in a new industrial-scale vaccine manufacturing facility in Senegal. When complete, we'll have the potential to produce hundreds of millions of doses of vaccine annually for COVID-19 and other diseases. It's an investment.
All our analysis on CBDC, in particular for the use of general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash, and there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
In the digital area, our economy's future increasingly depends on people's ability to connect to secure information and communications technologies. We need to strengthen the use of trusted technologies so that our online information cannot be used by autocrats to consolidate their power or repress their people. We need worldwide effort to invest in transformative clean energy projects to ensure that critical infrastructure is resilient to changing climate. Critical materials that are necessary for our clean energy transition, including the production of batteries, need to be developed with high standards for labor and environment.
We thank the panellists for their insights. As we confront the climate crisis, women and girls' human rights must be at the centre of our collective efforts. Climate change and its consequences can exacerbate the risk of sexual and gender-based violence. Climate change and its consequences can exacerbate the risk of sexual and gender-based violence. This risk is most acute for women and girls facing multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination and inequality, including Indigenous women and girls. Australia is committed to achieving gender equality and eliminating sexual and gender-based violence, including during emergencies. Australia is providing funding to train disaster responders to identify and support women and girls experiencing family and domestic violence during and after natural disasters.
Our conversation with Zhuganov was repeated with Lebed. They talked about they don't want this NATO expansion, they know it's not in their security interests, and on, and said, well, and if you do that, we may have to look to China. And I couldn't help using the colloquial expression from my state by saying to Zhuganov, lots of luck in your senior year. Good luck. And if that doesn't work, try Iran. I'm serious. I said that to them, and these were, and they know, I knew, they knew, everybody knows that is not an option. And everybody knows, every one of those leaders acknowledges and needs, and they resent it. But they need to look west. And the question is, well, this is designed to completely shut them out. I think the one place where the greatest consternation would be caused in the short term for admission, having nothing to do with the merit and preparedness of the country to come in, would be to admit the Baltic states now in terms of NATO-Russian, US-Russian relations. And if there was ever anything that was going to tip the balance, were it to be tipped in terms of a vigorous and hostile reaction, I don't mean military, in Russia, it would be that.
The fallout from the war in Ukraine has brought a focus on a part of Russia you may not know well. It's called Kaliningrad. It has a population of 1 million, and it sits between Lithuania, Poland, and the Baltic Sea. And while it's separate from the rest of Russia, it's strategically important.
The military presence is huge. It's pretty much one big military base.
Russia's Baltic Fleet is there, so are tens of thousands of Russian troops. And now it's the latest pressure point between Russia and the West. The EU introduced a raft of sanctions after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and Lithuania finds itself at the front line of imposing them. It's brought in a ban on some goods being transported by rail between Kaliningrad and the rest of Russia. And this warning is followed.
Russia will certainly respond to such hostile actions. Their consequences will have a serious negative impact on the population of Lithuania.
We don't know what those consequences may be, but we know about the sanctions. The Times reports a choking off of the supply of items such as iron, washing machines, crockery and perfume. The governor of Kaliningrad says 40 to 50% of rail imports are affected. But Russia's reaction may not only be about that. There's also the expansion of the military alliance, NATO. Kaliningrad borders 2 NATO members, Lithuania and Poland. Also nearby are Latvia, Estonia, Germany and Denmark. And now, in response to the invasion of Ukraine, Sweden and Finland have applied to join too. Amongst all of these countries is Kaliningrad and the Russian military. And as tensions rise, there's a tension on the border between Lithuania and Poland. It's known as the Suwalki Gap, and it separates Kaliningrad from Russia's ally, Belarus. Politico has called it the most dangerous place on earth.
Together, this constitutes the biggest overhaul of collective defense and deterrence since the Cold War. The purpose of this increased presence is to send a message that we are ready to protect and defend every inch of Allied territory, including, of course, Lithuania and the other Baltic countries. And by doing that, we are providing credible deterrence. And the purpose of credible deterrence is not to provoke a conflict, but to prevent a conflict, to prevent Russia or any other potential adversary from attacking into allied country. Then, of course, we are concerned about the military buildup in Kaliningrad. We have seen that over many years, also with highly advanced weapon systems. That's also part of the reason why we have modernized our armed forces, our capabilities, and also increased our presence in that part of the region.
Speaking alongside NATO's Secretary General, President Biden announced Wednesday the U.S. will bolster its military presence in Europe in the face of Russia's continued threat.
Today I'm announcing the United States will enhance our force posture in Europe and respond to the changed security environment, as well as strengthening our collective security.
The administration says that will include the first permanent U.S. presence in Poland, adding 2 F-35 squadrons to the UK, deploying additional air defense in Germany and Italy, as well as stationing 2 more destroyers in Spain.
Together, our allies, we're going to make sure that NATO is ready to meet threats in all directions across every domain, land, air, and the sea.
And in a historic move, NATO will expand, extending a formal invitation to Sweden and Finland after Turkey dropped its opposition Tuesday. NATO also says collectively it will significantly increase the number of troops on standby from 40,000 to more than 300,000.
President Putin has not succeeded in closing NATO's door. He's getting the opposite of what he wants. He wants less NATO. President Putin is getting more NATO.
Finland and Sweden had applied for NATO membership in response to Russia's war on Ukraine, now entering the 5th month.
I think that this is where we're going. Our North Star is that by the end of the decade, we hope to basically get to around 1 billion people in the metaverse doing hundreds of dollars of commerce each, buying digital goods, digital content, different things to express themselves. So whether that's clothing for their avatar or different digital goods for their virtual home or things to decorate their virtual conference room, utilities to be able to be more productive in virtual and augmented reality and across the metaverse overall. So I think that there's going to be a massive economy around this. It's going to create a lot of opportunity for creators. That's why you hear me talking about the creator economy so much. I'm just really excited about a world where you're going to have millions of more people who can do creative work that just makes them happy as their job, instead of some of the things that they might be doing today because they feel like they need to in order to make money. I think that's going to be a massive opportunity, but certainly I think it's a huge business opportunity for us too, for the reasons that you say. Our playbook over time has been build services, try to serve as many people as possible, get our services to 1 billion, 2 billion, 3 billion people, and then we basically scale the monetization after that. And we've done that with Facebook and Instagram. WhatsApp is really going to be the next chapter, with business messaging and commerce being a big thing there. But then, around the metaverse and all the commerce and digital goods around that, I think that's going to be a really big leg of our business, especially over the next several years as we get into the second half of this decade too.
Such a good digital twin that you'll be able to go into the metaverse, into a virtual reality world, turn a dial, pull a switch, feel around, and actually change it in the real plant.
Absolutely. And this is not far off. I mean, the physical and the digital worlds, they will grow together, and the result is exactly what you just said.
I wanted to ask when you all think we're going to move from this form factor to something that's on your face, glasses, and when computing's all on the edge.
All right, 50 seconds. Who wants to answer quickly?
I think it will go. It will. First of all, it will definitely happen. I was talking about 6G earlier, which is around 2030. I would say that by then, definitely the smartphone as we know it today will not anymore be the usual kind of the most common interface. Wow. Many of these things will be built directly into our bodies. Many of these things will be built directly into our bodies.
Many of these things will be built directly into our bodies.
Can you imagine that in 10 years when we are sitting here, we have an implant in our brains, and I can immediately feel, because you all will have implants.
We now want to welcome David Malpass, president of the World Bank. Welcome back to Face the Nation.
Thank you very much. But there's also shortages, there's inflation, and the food shortages for the poorer countries are becoming a significant concern. They already are.
I mean, global inflation, it's not just the US, it's other wealthy countries around the world, but you're also describing a recipe for global instability.
It feeds in when there's not enough food that for weaker countries, poorer countries, that causes instability, and it's a big factor in the turnover of governments that's been occurring in quite a few of the countries.
So a State Department official said a few days ago, food crisis will be at least a 3-year problem. Food crisis will be at least a 3-year problem.
Food crisis will be at least a 3-year problem.
What time horizon do you put on the food crisis and the energy crisis?
I'll say one thing, it's possible to produce enough to soften that crisis, but at the rate that we're going right now, the fertilizer isn't being made. You know, fertilizer comes, a giant source of fertilizer is from natural gas through the ammonium channel into the most useful fertilizer, and it also is used to make the electricity that converts the minerals into fertilizer. And that's just not happening. So a lot of the world is shutting down for lack of fertilizer, and then those shortages of crops will last for multiple years. It's going to take time to come down, but again, that depends on what's your forecast for oil prices, for natural gas prices, for fertilizer. It's going to take months and months and maybe 2 years to bring inflation back down.
Are we at crisis?
We're at crisis, and we see more countries falling in one by one.
Okay, so there you have it right there. This is the head of the World Bank. This is no longer conspiracy or anything like that. This is these people, politicians, leaders, talking about this on mainstream media channels. They are telling you now, they are warning you, and they're warning everybody else that we are going to have food shortages. So it was only last week, if you remember, we were talking about Jurassic Park, the new movie, and I said, did you notice the pre-programming in there about locusts? And these locust swarms eating all the food. Well, very interesting, a couple of notes here. I don't know if you've been seeing what's been in all the news this week. In fact, I did a search for news on this, and it was crazy. There were hundreds of results of, yep, you guessed it, locusts eating through all of the crops. Now we're gonna take a walk as we go here, but this is what they're called. They're called Mormon crickets. Why? Because back in the day, it was the Mormon grounds that they ate through all of their crops. But these things are 2 inches long, they're cannibalistic, so the stronger ones are getting stronger every year because the weaker ones, if they're too slow, all the other crickets eat them. Now they're called crickets, but they're really locusts. These things are huge. What else? In 2021, so just last year, 10 million acres of farmland were destroyed by these things. 10 million acres. And now we've got all of it sweeping through Africa as well, the African continent. We've got these swarms of locusts. So this really is biblical in nature. If you think about it, what's actually going on here? We've got all these food shortages. We've now got locusts sweeping through the countries, and we have all this destruction of food. We have farmers being paid not to farm as well. Been seeing it this week on a number of farming sort of groups and things, but they're saying that it's about 1/3 of all UK farmers are not planting or haven't planted this year, and instead they've claimed insurance. A lot of American farmers as well have claimed insurance due to flooding or drought or the seed price being too high, so they're simply not planting this year. And the other thing I find really interesting about all of this as we go down the steps here is that this has all come at the same time as this launch of bug protein. Yes, bug protein, cricket meatballs. Do you fancy some cricket meatballs? I think I'll pass. Do I want to be switching up my protein to bug protein, insect protein? No thanks, I think I'll pass. I don't know how you feel about it, drop your comments below. But Wales, the Welsh schools seem to be okay with it. All these trials now, they're switching up beef and chicken for bugs in all these trials, and apparently the students love it. They can't get it, yeah, of course they do. All to do with climate change and global warming. This is why they're doing it apparently. So interesting statistic then, they are estimating by the year 2027 that insect protein will be worth $1.38 billion per year as an industry. I mean, that is huge. They're even talking about, which makes no sense, they're even talking about feeding it now to cattle and livestock.
Cost of living pressures are forcing some Melburnians to downsize to spaces smaller than a room. The high-tech sleeping pods are the latest answer to a rental squeeze as more July the 1st relief looms.
As Victoria's housing affordability crisis deepens, unique setups like these space shuttle pods are offering short-term solutions for renters desperately needing somewhere to sleep.
I have a lot of in-betweeners. They stay here while they look for another place.
The landlord says more than 80% of his pods in Abbotsford are booked out.
As of today, the weekly rate is $250.
After the 1st of July, you might find you're getting less
income into your bank account.
The new financial year doesn't bring good news for motorists already battling soaring fuel costs. Toll prices will increase by just over 1%, and then again in October.
And what do you and your family do to cut back on plastics?
We have recently switched to drinking water bottles out of water out of when we have water bottles out of a plastic. Away from plastic towards paper, like drink box water bottles, sort of thing. Water bottles out of water out of when we have water bottles out of a plastic. Water bottles out of water.
Impressive. Very nice.
What's the matter with you?
And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. All these are the beginning of sorrows.